All right, so I'm going to need all the fake outrage from Kansas City fan to cease to exist. My goodness. Stop calling Buffalo fraudulent. Stop saying you could have won the game. Stop pretending that your football team is not 9-1. You're acting like they're a 500 football team. Stop pretending that you probably still don't have the best quarterback in the NFL. Stop pretending that you haven't won Super Bowls. Stop pretending that you don't have maybe the greatest tight end in the NFL in Travis Kelce. Stop pretending all of this BS. It's annoying. You are an extremely spoiled fan base right now. And you don't even know it, and you don't even hear yourselves. Are you paying attention? Have you been paying attention all season long? I have been saying for weeks that the Kansas City Chiefs have been living on edge. Games that they clearly should have lost. But I compared the Kansas City Chiefs to what was said about Iceman. You get bored, you do something stupid, they wear you down, bam, they got you. That's how the Kansas City Chiefs have been living really for the last couple of years. And it's worked out for them. And you were bound to lose a game at some point this season. Quit fronting like losing one game is the end of the world. Stop the cap. You're going to be okay. Now, I said at the beginning of the season, I don't think Kansas City three-peats. There's a million and one reasons for that. Number one, because it's obviously the most difficult thing to do in the NFL. But the predominant reason is because there's just so many changes. You're constantly trying to load up your roster for Patrick Mahomes. Every time somebody comes available, you go out and you get them. You've got injuries, so what do you got to do? You got to fill the roster spot. You got to go and get it who's ever available. Look, at the end of the day, should they have beat Buffalo? I'm going to say yes and no to that. There were opportunities. You missed them. I've said for I don't know how long that Josh Allen is a turnover nightmare with the Bills. But at the end of the day, while your defense really didn't play all that bad, your offense just could not back up what your defense was doing. That's all there is to it. And really, I've been saying since week one this year, I mean, come on, if you go back to the Baltimore Ravens game, who we're going to talk about here in a little bit, the Ravens, you understand that you should have won that game in a blowout. Baltimore should have never been in any position in the fourth quarter where they could have come back. That game should have been over at halftime. Baltimore was shooting themselves in the foot, and you could not completely capitalize. This is not the same football team that we've been seeing over the last few years. I think Patrick Mahomes is still hungry. I think Travis Kelce is still hungry, but they're not starving. They've been eating good for really long, and even though they're hungry for that plate, they're not starving. And anybody who's ever played sports, anybody who's ever done anything with athletics knows exactly what I'm talking about. There's a difference between being hungry and starving. When you're hungry and you've been eating already, well, I could eat, but, I'll wait till later. When you're starving to death, you're going to eat whatever's put in front of you. And Kansas City's still in a really good position. Because let's keep it a buck. At the beginning of the year, it looked like the AFC West was going to be maybe the toughest division in the NFL. It has not turned out that way whatsoever. You slid by, you made some plays, you did what you had to do, you blocked a field goal against the Denver Broncos last weekend, and that was how you closed out that game. It's been team winning to this point. Now some of your ineptitudes have been exposed, and what you have to do is go back and figure out where are we weak and how do we correct it. And to be honest with you, I want to see more run game. Hunt is still a damn good running back, and I think you need to use him more and more and more. The play calling has gotten stagnant from Andy Reid. You're missing elements that you didn't think you'd miss. The Chiefs are still a damn good football team. Kansas City fans, stop pretending that you don't have multiple trophies up in there. Everything is fine. Everybody's fine. It's one damn loss. Really, at the end of the day, all this really means is the oldies from the 72 Dolphins team, they're going to pop champagne or do whatever the hell they're going to do and celebrate the fact that there's not going to be an undefeated Super Bowl champion. That's pretty much what this game amounts to. You were bound to lose at some point. It's okay to lose a game. You're 9-1. You're not 6-5. Stop acting like your season is on the brink. You're on the fringe. This is not comparable to Philly last year. Although if I really wanted to, I could say it is. Winning kind of like, are they really that good? And then finally they get exposed and they lose for real. So it could be that, but even then Philly won 11 games. Like, what are we discussing here? I think everybody needs to cool the hell out if I'm keeping it a buck. All right. Moving on, Pittsburgh, Baltimore. Look, the Ravens are a football team that when they lose games, it is because they have been beating themselves. Again, I reiterate, the Kansas City Chiefs game, all the penalties. In fact, coming into this weekend, the Baltimore Ravens led the NFL in penalties. Now, that's just a point of fact. Derrick Henry has been playing out of his mind football. Not a single one of us haven't made fun of Jerry Jones for not going after him. He fumbled it. They lost the fumble. Baltimore played really good in the red zone. I mean, what was Pittsburgh? 0 out of 4 inside of the red zone in that football game? They relied on their defense. They relied on their running game. To me, they didn't give Russ enough chances to throw the football, which even then, the interception he threw inside of the red zone, to me, was symptomatic of an offense it's frustrated, right? Russ is doing anything he can to make a play, to score a touchdown. We're frustrated. We're pissed off. We need to score. That was the result of that. Now, is that an immature decision? Is that more of a rookie mistake than a veteran mistake? Absolutely, because we saw Russ last weekend make veteran plays. The throws, and then, of course, the drawing off sides at the end of that football game to seal the deal. That was veteran football right there. Wasn't that way against Baltimore. And Baltimore's going to look back on the game against Kansas City, on the game against Pittsburgh especially, and they're going to go, we should have won. But interceptions, fumbles, penalties, missed field goals galore. We did not execute in the facets of the game that Pittsburgh did, because Pittsburgh was phenomenal with special teams. Down inside the red zone, the play calling wasn't necessarily horrible, but Baltimore's defense was ready for it. And even when it looked like maybe they're not ready for it, they still played up to it. So you have to give credit to Baltimore's defense for keeping them in that football game. This is a game that Pittsburgh's going to look at, to me, and they're going to go, yo, we skated out with that one. And they absolutely did. Couldn't convert after you scored the touchdown. When all is said and done, the Ravens and honestly, neither quarterback played great, right? Russ didn't play great. Lamar didn't play great. Everybody expected this offensive explosion. What were you anticipating? These are two teams that are defensive minded with Mike Tomlin and Harbaugh, and they're going, man, we're going to do everything we can. I mean, come on, everybody's been talking about the secondary with Baltimore and how it's not that great. You don't think that they didn't make special adjustments knowing that they're going against Russell Wilson this weekend? Come on, man. This is what great coaches do. They make adjustments. They did what they needed to do. Baltimore's defense stepped all the way up. Offensively, is where they failed. And even then, defensively with some of the penalties, and even then, Pittsburgh kind of did themselves in. I mean, there was a drive where they basically gave it to Baltimore because they weren't doing anything, but penalty, got them ahead. You can't make mistakes like that going forward. But that was just a tough, damn divisional game. When all is said and done, Pittsburgh was able to come up with the win, but I'm not sure that I was impressed by it. I still say with Russell Wilson as the quarterback, AFC Championship bare minimum, but you can't survive going 0-4 in the red zone. That's just all there is to it. You've got to score points. Pittsburgh's going to look at this game going, we should have won it running away. The turnovers that we forced, everything that we did defensively set us up offensively, and we failed our defense. And that's pretty much the bottom line of that scenario. All right. So John Jones, like I said yesterday, I didn't pay to see the fight, but ESPN, they posted the entire third round where Jones was able to put that thing away. Look, a lot of people are complaining. They're like, oh, this is just two old guys. Congratulations to Jones. He beat up, Miocic, and he hasn't fought in 4 years, which, by the way, it's been 3 years, but it is what it is. He looks slow. Miocic didn't look that great. Stop glorifying John Jones, et cetera, et cetera. Let's stop pretending that Jones didn't have a layoff, too. Let's stop pretending that he hasn't been holding up that division. Let's stop pretending he hasn't been holding onto that belt for a year and a half. Don't act as if, though, John Jones has been in that cage every 3 to 6 months like clockwork, because it hasn't been happening. What we saw was a good old-fashioned war. That was it. They just stood toe-to-toe for the most part and beat the living hell out of each other. And Jones was able to connect on that foot shot, right? And that was the end right there. Now, Miocic had already been rattled in a couple of other spots. Same with Jones, but what Jones was doing is far more effective. And Jones was doing great at cutting off the cage, walking him down. He dominated that fight, whether anybody likes it or not, especially in the third round where he put him away. Look, I saw other parts of that fight. I'm okay with giving round number 1 to Miocic. 2 and 3 definitely belong to Jones, that's for sure. He walked him down. And Miocic was letting him. Look, that's one of the things I've called I don't know how many MMA fights. I've called I don't know how many kickboxing fights. I've done play-by-play for I don't know how many combat sports events in general. And one of the things that I always talk about is the killer instinct. A shark in the water who smells blood. In the opportunities that Miocic had, he failed. Jones, whenever he continued to see an opening, he took it, and then from there, he still remained aggressive. Miocic was the exact opposite in those situations, and that's why Jones won the fight. Whether anybody likes it or not, that is exactly what happened. Seriously. That's exactly what happened. And look, we're not talking quantum physics here, man. We are talking MMA. We're talking the basics of MMA, not even the intricacies. We're talking the basics of MMA. So there you have it. I think it's simple, and I wish people would stop complaining. It was a hell of a lot better than what we got on Friday night. And the reason why a good majority of people watched that damn thing was because it was for free. Just admit, you stayed in on Friday night and you dealt with the lagging and the BS and the bandwidth loss from Netflix. And I mean, there was a point, because I was at the homie's crib watching it. He was like, you want to come over? I'm like, yeah, sure. Let's do it. I was just going to stay home. Went over to the homies. I think it was the 6th round of that Paul Tyson fight. And all of a sudden, the picture got really clear. And I was just like, yo, bro, everybody's quit watching this by now. That's why the picture looks so good. Like, everybody, they just gave up. All right, college football. The polls are out for the AP, that is. Oregon is still number one after they slid by Wisconsin. You got Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, Indiana, Notre Dame, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss. Tennessee drops from 6 to 10 after the loss to Georgia. You got Miami, who didn't play. You got Boise State. They beat San Jose State. You got SMU. They beat Boston College. Real ugly win there, but they were able to get it done. BYU, they lost to KU. They dropped significantly from 7 to 14. You got A&M. They pretty much stayed where they are. Colorado, they're up a couple of spots. Not many, but they're up. Clemson, they beat Pitt. You got Army in there still. They're undefeated. South Carolina, Tulane, Arizona State, Iowa State, UNLV, Illinois, and Washington State rounds it out. So there's that. Look, at this point, I think we know that the AP poll is pretty much irrelevant to an extent, right? I think it holds merit with the committee. The committee copycats it and mirrors it for the most part. What I want to see from the committee this week is whether or not they get honest about college football, and really more from them, ESPN. I want to reiterate something here, and this is very simple. There were only 15 teams in the FBS that didn't play against an FCS team. There's 16 teams in the SEC. Only one of them didn't play against an FCS team, and that was Texas. The Big Ten led the way in the amount of teams who didn't play against an FCS team. And notable names, especially right now, are Ohio State and Penn State. Then you look at Notre Dame. They didn't play an FCS team. So while everybody's bickering and moaning about strength of schedule and how much it needs to matter and this and that and the third, the reality is those teams, I think, are getting the treatment from the committee that they're getting because they're going, these other teams have had some soft games in there. Now, I'm not saying that Texas and Penn State and Ohio State, Notre Dame haven't scheduled some soft teams, but they didn't schedule an FCS opponent. And by the way, Notre Dame beat Texas A&M. Everybody keeps saying they haven't played anybody, but they have that win. I know. They turned around. They lost to Northern Illinois. Pay attention to what the hell I'm saying here, and that is you can't have it both ways. You can't say Notre Dame is soft, their schedule ain't jack, they lost to Northern Illinois, and then completely dismiss their win over Texas A&M, and then simultaneously tell all of us, by the way, the SEC is still the best conference in the country. And by the way, Vanderbilt lost to Georgia State, a football team that is 2-8, but they were able to beat Alabama. Tell me that shouldn't be significant, because it absolutely should be. Now, you can make the argument that coaches and, game planning and all that, they kind of get to know each other, but Caleb DeBoer, first year in the SEC. I understand he's kind of carrying on the Nick Saban offense, which Nick Saban didn't want to give into, but it's finally got modernized right over the last few years. He finally gave into it. Now we have what we have. What I am telling you is this. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot tell us that the SEC is the creme de la creme and then downplay the win that Notre Dame has over A&M. You cannot talk to us about the strength of schedule of Texas and then say, well, Georgia beat them, but then downplay where Texas is currently at with only one loss. You can't have it both ways. And here's another fun fact. The strength of schedule is determined before the season even begins, along with preseason polls. So while everybody's hooting and hollering about this win over a ranked opponent and that win over a ranked opponent, the strength of schedule takes into a lot of things. But the primary thing that they take into account is how they think a team will do during the season and how the teams that they think of the teams that they are playing will do. So while people are talking about Georgia's strength of schedule, the fact of the matter is You have to bring in all the other factors. They lost to Alabama, who lost to Vanderbilt, who lost to Georgia State. That has to be something that's taken into account. Who then beat Tennessee. And Tennessee was in one of those SEC teams that scheduled an FCS opponent in Chattanooga. Now, somebody's going to go, well, they beat North Carolina State and they were ranked. Again, that was a preseason ranking. And by the way, if we take, 12 or 13 teams that I calculated yesterday between LSU, North Carolina State, KU, K-State, there were several teams. The bottom line is their record is 51 losses or 51 wins and 59 losses. That's the way that it is. You don't have to like it, but that is a point of fact. So you can be upset with me all you want to, but I'm going to tell you, don't shoot the messenger. Kind of like don't hate the player, hate the game. It's just the way that it is. Because I get so sick of Brody doesn't know ball. Bro, it's not about whether or not I know ball. Any journalist on ESPN, CBS, Fox Sports, anybody who's worth their salt should know this information. But they have a financial bias. And so what do? They skew the numbers to mean anything that they need it to mean because they know damn good and well that the strength of schedule was determined before the season even began. So that win that Tennessee has over North Carolina State is basically abysmal now. That's whether you like it or not. It looked good at the beginning, but it only looked good because of preseason polls sticking a number in front of somebody's name in order to draw a rating. But I got news for everybody. Tennessee versus North Carolina State is going to sell. Georgia versus Clemson is going to sell. Notre Dame versus Texas A&M is going to sell. Don't be fooled. Stop letting them lie to you. Stop letting them. And then I get people, what do they tell me? You're skewing. Everybody's moving the goalpost so that way it can fit whatever they need it to fit for an SEC football team. Just because you're all over there playing each other does not make you a great conference. Oh, you're going to tell me that such and such is a great conference top to bottom? Look, man, I've said for years that I thought the Pac-12 when it existed was overrated. I've said for years that I think the Big 12 is overrated. In fact, I've said several times this season, I don't even know how the hell they're a power conference. I don't think a Big 12 team is going to win the college football championship. Hell no. But then again, strength of conference, and I've also said this because more than one thing can be true at a time, does not necessarily dictate how truly great a football team is. When Clemson won their initial championship, everybody talked about how weak the ACC was. They compared how many five-star recruits Alabama had compared to Clemson, but it didn't matter because Clemson ended up winning that football game. There are 1,000,001 other factors that play in. And then what do I get told? Come on, man, shrink the schedule matters. Look what happened with Georgia and TCU. You know, everybody said the Big Ten wasn't that great. Everybody said Ohio State wasn't that great. And I said that there was only one football team offensively that could hang with Georgia, and that was Ohio State. 42-41 was the final of that football game. And I'd also made mention that defensively was their weakness, and I didn't think special teams-wise they'd be able to keep up. And look how that game went. And I've got the archive if anybody wants to see it. I ain't worried about it. What I am telling you is this. We can't go off of this and this and this and this and this. And why can't we? Well, because I want a true playoff system. And by the way, these rankings don't matter because when all is said and done, the highest ranked 5 conference champions are going to get in, and 4 of those teams are going to get an automatic bye. So even if they have a lower ranking than another football team that's not going to get a bye, that won't matter. These rankings don't even matter anymore, and they are convincing you and pretending that they do when they literally don't. There was financial bias all the way across the board. What's the bottom line here? Well, it's very simple. 3 things. Number 1, rankings don't matter anymore. I'm so sick of it. Number 2, I want preseason strength of schedule, and I want preseason polls to go away. I've said umpteen times that if we are going to do polls, then we shouldn't have them before the 8th week is completed. And then the final thing is here, let's stop making it out to be something that it isn't. We have to be fair and honest about where every team is in college football. And every team's got a weakness. Oregon, their weakness is their defense, believe it or not. Penn State, it's the refusal to run the football the way that they should and putting the football in the hands of Drew Aller when if they didn't feel like they had something to prove with this kid, they'd be in a much better place right now. Indiana is absolutely a factor of what's called brand bias all of a sudden, thanks to Joe Klatt, but I've been saying it for weeks prior. They are the epitome of that right now. I know they've got Ohio State coming up this weekend. Everybody's looking forward to it, but it is what it is. Notre Dame is the victim of being Notre Dame. It's a brand name. Same thing with Georgia, same thing with Alabama. All these teams in the SEC, they're all brand names. We need to start making football decisions. I've said it 1,000,001 times, and not business decisions. This isn't ballet. This isn't figure skating. We're not basing things off of a point system. We are basing things off of one thing and one thing only, wins and losses. But because the system is designed the way that it is, we have to put in place all of these other BS factors that should never exist, because the final bottom line here is we need a true playoff system. Here's the rules. Here's the way it's set. Here's what we're doing with it. Here's how you get in. And that's all there is to it. We're taking out the objectivity and subjectivity of somebody saying, well, this is a really great loss. All right. I am Drew Duncan. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan Radio. And wherever you listen to the podcast, tell your device to play Drew Duncan. I am not difficult to find, not a needle in a haystack. Guys, enjoy the rest of your night and or day. Stay safe, everybody.